The greatest tribute that has been paid to India in the liberation war of Bangladesh is by Michael Walzer in his seminal book, Just and Unjust Wars. And he goes on to say that it is 20th century's most outstanding example of humanitarian intervention. He also says that the world was aware of it, the world chose to neglect it. India had no option but to go in, and they did an outstanding job. Having said that, when genocide was at its peak, India decided to do an intervention. It was both done on the Eastern Front and the Western Front. The Western Front was not with the idea of doing anything damaging to the Pakistanis. The aim was to contain any aggression that might come out as a result of what might happen to them in the East. In the East, East Pakistan was ingressed by 3 corps. On the western side, there was 2 corps. On the north of that was 33 corps. On the eastern flank was 4 corps. I was part of 4 corps, so I will only talk about the operations of 4 corps led by Sagat Singh, who did a masterful job, and more about it as it unfolds. When we look at 4 corps operations, I would look at it in military terms, first at the tactical level. At the tactical level, the Battle of Akhaura, which is just opposite Agartala, in my view, stands out an outstanding example of what a brigade can do to a fixed fortified position of the adversary, all in a matter of 72 hours. It was an outstanding achievement of going around the objective and making the enemy flee under distress. That was the tactical level. The flight of the Pakistanis from Akhaura acted like a trigger for what happened thereafter. They ran and went on to what would have been an occupied position by abandoning that. They abandoned Brahman Maria, went on to Bhairab Bazar. There they had a little bit of a skirmish with us because forces were not across the river, and yet they were under orders, or they were under the illusion that they will have to blow up the bridge. They did a small counterattack, which only delayed the proposition that was to follow. And under orders of GOC 14, they blew up the bridge while their troops were this side of many of their troops were this side of the river. Now in military parlance, when you blow up a bridge and your troops are on the wrong side of it, there is no other way but to accept and call it panic. This panic was caused by the speed of the operations in which 311 Mountain Brigade of 57 Div, part of 4 Corps, moved in on the kill. This having happened, the bridge was blown in our face. The leading troops are about 400 to 800 yards away from the bridge. Now what happens next is a masterpiece of in the operational language of any soldier. There is General Sagat Singh, who does not have the requirement to go across the river. He sees the bridge blown up. He sees the enemy on both sides of the bridge, trying to get back and occupy a position opposite in Ashuganj or Bhairab Bazar, and he decides what to do. A soldier of his reputation, who has been through these similar positions earlier, now finds himself standing at a Y junction. One part of the Y junction says, my job is done, the matter is over. The other part of the Y junction says, what can I do next? This I would call adaptive strategy, at which Sagat had a masterpiece control, and I would call it the master stroke of the 1971 operations. What does Sagat do? He gets hold of his Air Force commander, Chandan Singh, and asks him whether a battalion could get across on helicopters. Chandan's answer is yes. He gets to me and says, Chami, what about your tanks? I said, sir, I'll give it a try. When you have a commander who is as strong, as willing, as capable, no matter what order he gives you in battle, your answer has to be a yes, sir. I said, sir, yes, but I did not know how I would cross. Meghna at that point, to a young man, I was all of 27, looks like an ocean. I could not see the other side. Having said yes, it took some time to understand how I could do it. Spending a few minutes, few hours, half a day, I said, sir, I need a helicopter to make a reconnaissance of the river and see where I can cross. He said, take it. I took one, went around, came back. Not satisfied, I asked for another one. I was given another chopper. What I did now was that there are islands within the river that were available. So I marked on my map, flying in a helicopter, the islands that I would have to hit because crossing it in one go was possibly not going to happen. Why would it not happen? PT-76 is designed for European battle across rivers in Europe which are 200 to 400 meters wide. When you want to do a perpendicular crossing, it's possible to do it if the speed of the river is not so strong as it was in the Meghna. Now the Meghna is now getting close to the Bay of Bengal, and as it moves closer to the bay, the speed of the rivers increases, and it was in so many knots that I knew if I entered in place A, I could only get away a couple of miles west of it. I was looking for those islands where I will be able to then berth. Having marked the islands, we got into the river, we crossed, and wonder of wonders, by then I had captured 3 Pakistani PT-76s, whom we prepared for crossing, then took them along and also crossed. Having crossed, we are now sitting outside Lakshya River, linking up with 4 guards commanded by Lieutenant General later, but then Colonel Himmat Singh, CO 4 guards. We are carrying out operations across the Lakshya River when we hear some noises about ceasefire. But our battle was over. We are just across the enemy, across the, I think it was Adamji jute mills in the area. And from then on, of course, it was like a driving into Dhaka. That's what we did. This is an appropriate occasion to identify and indicate what the operational maneuver of Sagat Singh meant for the success of the battle. You are not tasked for it. But when you weigh the situation, you realize that the enemy is in panic. He is not willing to get out of his bunkers. There is shock that has been created. And the best time to exercise an operational maneuver is when the enemy is under panic and shock. What happens in such maneuvers is that you actually play on the mind of the adversary. You're not now looking for terrain objectives. It is the mind of the objective, or the mind of the adversary that Sagat played on. How did it play out? Very close, there was 14 Div of the Pakistanis, but had just gone back over the bridge. They were not stirring out. And as I recall Sagat mentioning, I overheard him say, they're digging deep, they're digging hard, they think I'm coming for them. They're digging their graves, I can do nothing to help them. Because he was going elsewhere. When the squadron and the battalion got across and moved on from Narsindi to Lakshya, not a man from 14 Div, which had just been beaten back, even stirred. So unopposed, we managed to do this crossing because the operational maneuver had played on the adversary's mind. I recall a report written by Hamudur Rahman report, post-1971, ordered by the Pakistan government, which was done in 2 parts, one before the prisoners of war got back and second after the prisoners of war got back. Niazi had written instructions from Pakistan that Dhaka would not be allowed to fall. If you look at this in relation to their preparation for Dhaka, and they had about 30,000 troops to garrison it, and yet it fell to 3,000 troops. Please recall that in this operational maneuver, in which Sagat played to the mind of the adversary, everybody was shell-shocked. Those in Dhaka, those in front of us, those behind us. And the credit for all this must also go not only to the ground forces, which went across and did what they did, in how the rest of India reacted to it. There was a para-brigade, which Gill, as a DGMO, waiting to pounce. The prospect of a captured Dhaka galvanized everyone up and down the security establishment. It saw Team India at its historic best. It led to the march of a column, infantry, tanks, and guns straight into the heart of the center of gravity. Further, as part of the teamwork at Delhi and Calcutta, two para commanded by the daredevil Lieutenant Colonel K.S. Pannu was on standby to paradrop at Tangail with a column of one Marathas under Bulbul Barar gliding down from Tura in Meghalaya for a link-up. On the naval front, from the 4th of December, India's aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, which had squadrons of Seahawks, Elysees, relentlessly bombed Chittagong, Cox's Bazar, Khulna, cutting off supply lines, carrying out contraband control, and preventing escape of those who wanted to run away from surrendering at Dhaka. The Air Force, master of the skies in the east, having successfully flown an infantry battalion across the Meghna, was targeting the government house at Dhaka, where Pakistani options to surrender or fight were still being discussed. Of course, at this stage, we did not know which of the two options they would take. Leaflets were being dropped over enemy emplacements in which Pakistani soldiers were exhorted to surrender lest they should fall into the hands of those they had tormented, the unfortunate Bengalis of East Pakistan. Behind the scenes, the staff were busy. General Jacob in Calcutta was deliberating the terms of surrender. General Jagjit Arora in his headquarters at Calcutta and Inder Gill as DGMO with the Chief of the Army Staff, General Sam Manekshaw, they were monitoring the battlefield and the developing global situations. They were conscious that time was at a premium. The intelligence agencies and the diplomats were tracking the threat of deploying the US 7th Fleet into the Bay of Bengal. The trump card of the Indo-Soviet Treaty was now fully in play. This was signed as late as August 71. And it was supported with repeated vetoes by the USSR at the UN Security Council. Our diplomats were also fighting with the UN. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and her colleagues held their nerve amidst intense rumors of intervention by the powers beyond. This sort of seamless energy is an assured recipe for success. There were tasks cut out and delivered on all fronts: military, diplomatic, political, strategic, operational, and tactical. It is this synergy that enabled the capture of Dhaka after Sagat's breathtaking Meghna River crossing maneuver. So, a multiplication of panic caused by the operational maneuver made the entire citadel of Dhaka collapse. When this collapsed, 4 Corps, 57 Mountain Div, and troops around 101 Comp Zone area, everybody moved into Dhaka, and the type of reception that we got is unimaginable. I cannot but close this for a word of praise for Mukti Bahini. Mukti Bahini have a large contribution in ensuring that the dream of Mujibur Rahman, Bangabandhu, of Bangladesh, of Sonar Bangla, fructifies. I say that because at many places they acted as our eyes and ears. At many places they told us what they thought the deployment was. Were we entirely dependent upon it? No. Did it help us? Enormously. This enormous help and the bravery of the young Mukti Bahini who were operating with us adds in itself a chapter in the annals of the freedom of Bangladesh and must not ever be forgotten. And let us not forget the surrender at the end of it, the surrender ceremony when it took place, it was surrender to the joint command which General Arora was commanding of the forces as well as those that joined in from the Mukti Bahini. It was a surrender to the joint command, which is what the document finally said. There's often a question asked about the Indian soldier. I mean, being Indian Army, I have obviously praised it. And not because I'm not being objective. I would say, with the entire integrity at my command, with all the reflection that I can have over the last 40, 41 years and thereafter, there is no equivalent to the Indian soldier anywhere in the world. I say that for three reasons. Our soldiers, and I'm sure it is available in the rest of the world too, we sign an unlimited liability bond. And the unlimited liability bond, when it manifests in a battle situation, the bravery, the finesse, the innovativeness is just amazing. I'm telling you, as a 27-year-old young man, seeing soldiers having 8 or 9 years service, and having come out of seeing what happened in 1962 to our own soldiers. I think leadership mattered. Leadership made a difference. But our soldiers are just outstanding. They're a piece of gold wherever they are, whatever they do. I cannot, and when I say soldiers, I'm meaning Army, Navy, Air Force. I've seen all of them perform immaculately under conditions that would normally distress a large number of normal human beings. The second thing, other than limited unliability bond, which he signs up and then delivers, the second is, he is not willing to accept a position of a runners-up. For him, runners-up means losing. But for a soldier, either you won it or you've lost it. He learns and trains to understand that runners-up is not an acceptable position. That's the second thing he stands for. And the third, which I think is a marvel as far as India is concerned, is unity in diversity. Caste, color, creed, sex, domicile mean nothing to him in camaraderie. Our soldiers, our team, my India, right or wrong. One of the things for which the Indian officer or the officers of the Army, Navy, Air Force is a time people should reflect upon, is the Chetwood model and similar models in the other two services in which we are brought up. What is that model? It says, the honor, welfare and safety of your country comes first, always and every time. That of the men you command comes next, always and every time. That of your own comes last, always and every time. That is the code and ethic on which the Indian soldier has been built, developed, trained and prepared for what he may confront. Every officer who's brought up in this ethos begins to understand that those who leading means being in the front. If you take a group of people and you're well ahead of them, they don't know what you're doing. If you're well behind them, they don't need you. If you're always with them, they'll take you for granted. The ability of the Indian officer to understand where he needs to be, at what time, what place, is so critical. And he's so trained in that success always follows the marvelous action that the troops carry out. Our brigade commander was Brigadier Misra, who had the experience of 1962 and 1965. And in 1965, he had got a Veer Chakra for his brave action. He understood battle, he understood fear, he understood where his position ought to be. He also understood what is expected of him and what he expects of his troops and what positioning and what orders will give him that delivery. So was it with General Gonsalves, so was the GOC. And of course, Sagat Singh is a mastermind as far as battle is concerned, because he's been through many battle experiences against the Chinese, but the Chinese, what he had done in Sikkim and things like that. So I would say the positioning of the commanders and linking it to the leadership option was a great asset in relation to saying, listen guys, I am not being told to go. I am being told, come over, I'm here. Or you can get there. And therefore the multiplier effect was exponential in relation to. The only thing which was against us was time. We were being pushed. And I remember getting a small souvenir from Brigadier, then Colonel Himmat, given to me after the battle. All it said was, push, push, push to Dhaka. The real lessons out of what happened in liberation of Bangladesh, where we went in and did humanitarian intervention, must not be only seen from the angle of the soldier or soldiering or what Mukti Bahini wanted or what Mujibur Rahman wanted and got delivered. I think there are 4 or 5 tenets that must not be lost sight of. At the end of the day, it's my view that it is the victory of democracy over military rule. Democracy gives the power to the soldier of understanding that the whole country is behind you. It adds to the primordial trinity that Clausewitz talked about, that the success of a battle, success in operations comes from when the people, the talent of the armed forces, and the political system are all in unison in relation to what is required next. And when all 3 get together and perform, success will also come in your way. Therefore, it's the victory of democracy over military rule. The power of democracy, the power of the freedom of expression, the power of the support that comes from behind cannot be imagined by anybody who's constantly under military rule. So that is the first thing I want people to remember when they talk of liberation of Bangladesh. And the people in Bangladesh themselves understood the type of treachery and genocide that they went through purely because of the military rule that was taking place after a democratically elected result was demolished. That's the first part. The second part is, and this is important for soldiers across the world, that this is the victory of humanism over barbarism. Soldiering cannot get into the business of acting in a barbaric fashion. You read all the books that have been written after the 1971 war, and not a single individual, group, correspondent, political class has ever mentioned that when our soldiers went in, they did anything which was unethical or anything that looked anything like what the Pakistanis had done to Bangladesh. It is a victory of humanism over barbarism. Humanism will always win. The third, and this is where I go back to Sagat, and this is where I go back to thinking, that is the victory of maneuver over attrition. When 30,000 entrenched people surrendered to 3,000 people because we have attacked their mind, that is called victory of maneuver over attrition. We could have attrited our way through and it would have taken us another month or 2 months or 6 months. But when you attack the adversary's mind, everybody is running around in panic, not knowing what is the next step. When you get an opportunity in battle and get to that Y junction which Sagat got into when the bridge was blown, that's the only way to exploit it. Maneuver over attrition. And last but not the least, liberation over occupation. We went to liberate them from genocide. That was a job. Within 90 days we were out. We did not claim anything, we did not want anything, we did not say anything. We had come to liberate them from a genocide. We did that and we were out. It was not an occupying force, it was a liberating force. It's not a liberating force to settle our own scores. That was never thought of, that was never done. That's what I think. Therefore, when you look at the 4 tenets which country cannot forget are these 4 areas. And I think they contribute hugely to the literature that is available in the 21st century. The soldiers with a soldiering instinct, democracies with a purpose should not be forgotten. And for our younger generation, who, as I talk to you now, may not have even been born then, Team India is invincible. When Team India gets its act together, nothing can put us down. 130 crore people will find their place in the Committee of Nations because it's coming from principles that are entirely, totally humanitarian. But 2 things stand out, which I think people must register. That religious forces do not necessarily mean that you can cause human destruction. It's something that will happen again and again if the laws that are being followed do not follow the humanitarian values. That is one. And the second thing is, and this is important, we had 93,000 prisoners of war. They came to us and stayed with us for a year. They went back unharmed. My own feeling, I had a younger brother who was looking after a prisoner of war camp, who was in the Battle of Hilli and got injured, and he was looking after that camp. We know how to look after a soldier in the Geneva Conventions, and we would not fault on doing just that. No matter what position they occupied against us, they were adversaries, and we knew that they were also part of the genocide. When next gen, and I'm talking about definitely my grandchildren, if not my children, when they look at the liberation of Bangladesh and the humanitarian intervention, they must always recall that there is a legacy that has to be lived up to. And I can define the legacy in many ways, but the best way to define it is when Team India gets together, we are invincible. It happened in 71, it will happen now and then, but this is a legacy that needs to be carried forward, because as the world order has now moved on to various things, lots of people are talking about lots of things that may happen or may not happen. But I repeat for Gen India, the next Gen India, that India is invincible if Team India operates like Team India.